guys, here are some crazy stats. 85% of jobs are filled through networking. And beyond that, according to CNBC, 70% of jobs aren't actually published publicly. So that means if you are only applying to the jobs that you see online, you are missing out on 70% of the jobs out there. And the only way for you to unlock or get access to those jobs is by networking. And that is an awful word that a lot of people don't like to use. They don't like to say, they don't think that they're good at it. So our specialist in networking, our career coach, Misha, is going to walk you through an entire workshop on how to network with confidence, none of the ick factor, none of the schmoozing that goes into normal people networking, how you can do it like a professional. So without further ado, I will let Misha do her thing. And for those of you who are new here, feel free to subscribe if you want more content like this. My name's Katie. I work with a company called Career Sprout, where we help professionals land high-paying job offers and build meaningful careers. Now, on average, it takes us about 63 days to increase somebody's salary by about $37,000 on average. So with that, I will let Misha take over from here and see you guys in the next one.
All right, so let's get started. We're just at 5 o'clock. I see some people continuing to join. We'll go ahead and get started and catch them up as they come aboard. So welcome everybody to Networking with Confidence, Career Sprout Workshop. My name is Misha Matalia. I am a coach with Career Sprout since last year. So a little bit about myself. I've spent most of my career as a consultant. I've worked in the US, Europe, Middle East, Latin America. I've worked across the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors. I've experienced working within Fortune 500 companies of hundreds of thousands of people, as well as small innovation agencies with fewer than 80. And I have experienced quitting jobs at least twice that weren't necessarily great fits. So I've really run the gamut of career experience over the last 15 years. More recently, in the last 5 years, and kind of getting to what some of these pictures are, I have tried my hand at documentary filmmaking after the first time I quit my job. Took a crash course, and that's in Union Square in New York, where I live. I got married in the pandemic. So that was a brief mask off picture during our wedding. And I have picked up hiking, and that was one of my favorite hikes my husband and I did sometime last year, upstate New York. So as I mentioned, since last year, I've been a coach with Career Sprout, as well as on my own. I'm passionate about career coaching primarily for two reasons. One, because I care deeply about democratizing access to opportunity. And two, because I believe a conversation is the smallest unit of change. And coaching lets me have many of those conversations each day as people try to figure out, navigate the rough territory sometimes that can be careers. So anyway, that's a bit about me, and I'm excited to talk to all of you today. So let's get into what we'll cover. There are 4 primary areas that I want to cover with you today about networking. You've probably seen this in some of our materials if you found us on Instagram or on LinkedIn. So we'll be talking about what networking is and why it's important to your career. We'll be talking about how to develop and execute a solid networking strategy that will help you succeed. And then we'll talk about common pitfalls and how to avoid them. One of the most common is that people just find networking inherently icky. And so we'll get into what that actually means, why that is, and how you can move through some of that ick. So what is networking? At its core, networking is about building relationships with people, companies, and industries. So it is not necessarily, there's this conception out there that networking is about going to meet and greets or meetups or industry conferences and the networking hour and exchanging business cards, and it's sometimes can feel really transactional. People coming right up to you and saying, "Hey, what do you do?" And it's less about the human and it's more about the just kind of like a very very transactional exchange. Instead, what we really emphasize with our clients is that networking at its core is about building relationships, human to human. So why is networking important to your career? There's four primary reasons. The first is that it gives you access to the hidden job market. So 85% of all jobs are filled via networking, and upwards of, and this number varies a bit and it's changed since the 80s, but something like 70% of jobs, it's reported in various cases, are never even posted online. So the vast majority of jobs in today's crowded, easy apply, LinkedIn apply market are landed through conversations, not applications. The second is to get reason that networking is really important and crucial to your career is because it helps you get closer to the off the record, unvarnished truth. So once you're in the application process with any company, the people you're speaking with are trained on what to share and they're trying to woo you too. They're trying to impress you, get you to come into their company. Coffee chats or informal networking, on the other hand, is ideally through warm introductions. It's not necessarily part of the job application process, and it allows you to bypass the company line of what the official statements are that they share about the culture, things like that, and dig deeper into the real experience of what it's like to work somewhere. The other reason, so kind of related to that, getting the unvarnished truth, is you don't know what you don't know. So business and almost all work really is about people and relationships. It's a way of organizing ourselves to accomplish something together. So back when I was in college, I used to think, all these companies I hear about on the news or all these brands I'd see on the grocery store shelves, I would always think that they're well-oiled machines. I'd imagine all this operational efficiency, revenues, profits. I would think of factory lines of just kind of like constant nonstop machines, just a bunch of machines churning beautifully away. It was only when I became a consultant, a strategy consultant, that I realized how much duct tape and elbow grease was involved and how a company is entirely a reflection of the people running it. So the only way then to really understand an organization is to get to know the people running it. That's how we learn about culture. So what do those people value? What excites them? What motivates them about their work? How do they engage with one another to make decisions? That kind of thing is the kind of information that you won't necessarily get any other way besides talking to the people that work there or working it yourself. The third reason networking is critical to your career search is it helps you get a leg up in the application process. So the point of applications and interviews from the hiring manager point of view is to reduce risk. They want to make sure that the hire can do the job, be a positive addition to the team, and bonus points if you demonstrate potential for growth. They often have lots of applicants to choose from and a short window of time to get to know them and make a decision. So how do they reduce the risk of the candidate being a dud? Right or wrong, trust often trumps merit. You rely on the people you already know and trust. Often, people that are objectively not the top of the pack, but are known entities because someone is vouching for them, someone has maybe worked with them before, they're coming in through a referral, they're the ones that often get the job. The fourth reason that networking is critical to career success is because it accelerates your long-term career success. A lot of people think of networking as a short-term, okay, I need to talk to a couple people, get a job application in, but it actually helps accelerate the longer-term trajectory. And this is one of the things that people don't necessarily always get right. So building long-term relationships with the right people, that could be recruiters and hiring managers, colleagues, alumni from college or boot camps you've done, potential mentors, will have a compound effect on your career if you manage it right. Even if someone doesn't have an opportunity right now or a connection that's going to be useful to you, by connecting authentically and sharing your interests, you're planting the seeds for the future. So with that, one of the things that came to mind as I was kind of coming up with like how to remember that, or what the crux of the message was there, is that maintaining relationships is just as important as starting new ones. This was an old Girl Scout. I was a Girl Scout for a very long time, 14 years. And one of the little jingles or things that we'd always say at the end as part of the Girl Scout promise, I think, was make new friends but keep the old. One is silver and the other is gold. So a lot of people focus on like, okay, constant outreach to new people. It's just as important to cultivate the connections you've already had and bring them along in the process. And I'll talk a little bit more about how to do that well later on. All right. So How do you network well? There's a couple tips I have for you. The first is that preparation is the absolute most essential part of how to network well. Everyone thinks or a lot of people come in thinking, okay, I'm just going to reach out to this person, or my brother's friend knows this person. I'll just shoot out an email here or there. That is fine. And maybe that'll help get you where you want to go. But to have to have more reliable long-term success through networking, you need to have a clear strategy. So I've pulled a few elements of Career Sprout's 5-step strategy for landing high-paying jobs you love to show you how to network well. So before you begin, it's important to prepare by first getting clear on what it is that you want out of your career. What is that long-term vision of where you want to be? You don't necessarily need to commit to that forever. It doesn't need to be your dream job in 5 years. It could just be for now, but you need to kind of have a sense of where it is that you're trying to go so you can target something now. What is the next step? Once you know what that next step is, your ideal next role, you want to make sure that you're optimizing your resume and LinkedIn for that role. There's lots of different ways to do that. We talk about, keyword optimization, things like that with a lot of our clients. It's something that we work on. And if it's something that you need help with, feel free to reach out about that. And then you shortlist your target company. So once you've optimized your profile, what companies is it that you want to reach out to that have that role, that are within the industry you want to work in, etc. Once you've gotten through all of those steps, we start planning and executing our network strategy. So there's really 5 steps here. The first is to identify your target. Identify who you're going to reach out to. This list should feel absurdly long, and it should grow over time. The idea here is not just quality of connections, but quantity, because frankly, people are really busy. Not everyone will reach back out to you. So for every company that you're targeting, you should ideally be talking to 5 to 10 people at each one. This will give you a better sense of the culture. Reaching out to that many people, even if you only get a third of them to reply, you'll have at least 3 different points of data on what it's like to work there, what you can expect, getting insight into the hiring process, things like that. The next step is to get, and actually, sorry, one more thing on identifying your target list of who to reach out to. When you're building this list, include not just the people that you already know, such as your friends and colleagues, maybe former colleagues that work at that company, friends that work at that company, but also people you don't know. This includes recruiters and hiring managers for your target roles, alumni of the schools or companies that you've worked at that work within your target industry, and also second-degree connections, people in your industry who you can be introduced to by those you already know. So this isn't just reaching out to people we know, it's making sure that we're going wider, we're casting a wider net than that. And I'll talk a little bit more about the importance of that later on as well. The second step is to get organized. So you want to create a tracker to keep track of where you are with each conversation, as well as come back to it of, hey, look, I've come back to it and make sure that you're noting any follow-up action. So what that might look like is, say I have Cynthia is someone that works at my target company. I put down her name, I put down how I know her, I put down when I first reached out to her and how I reached out to her, whether it's LinkedIn or email. I note down if I followed up, if I got a response or not. And then I note down any notes from that conversation and any next steps. Maybe Cynthia said that she'd introduce me to Jonathan. And so now I'm going to be following up with Jonathan, but also letting her know how that conversation goes. It's almost like building a personal CRM for yourself of the people that you are speaking with or like targeting speaking with and how each of those conversations is going. And ideally, this is something that lasts you not just for your job search, but longer term as well, something that you can come back to throughout your career as you actually build that Rolodex that people talk about. The next step, step 3, is creating a repeatable system. So we really like to take the lazy way. And I'll speak for myself. I like to, what this means is instead of sitting down every time, it feeling like a chore because you're reaching out to 3 or 5 people today, have scripts for yourself. You can write out scripts for yourself for initial outreach. You can write out scripts for yourself for follow-up, and then you can tweak each of those as you reach out to someone. So the process of reaching out to each new person, instead of it taking half an hour because you're writing a fresh email, can just take less than 5 minutes, because you're kind of adding in a few specific details about them, about your connection and how you know each other, about what, the logistics of when you want to meet. And it allows you to be a lot more efficient in your process. So one of the things that we talk about is also respecting people's time, because you'll see better results. These notes that you write should be polite, but they should be to the point. Put your ask up front. Let them know what the connection is. Share why you admire or value them, want to talk to them, and keep it as short and sweet as possible. The fourth step is mapping each conversation. So each conversation you go into, once it's scheduled, once it's on the books, you should set aside some time to prepare. Go into each conversation with clear objectives. What is it that you want to learn about? What would you like to leave with? What's the call to action for the other person? Do you want them to put in a referral for you? Do you want them to introduce you to someone else? Even if through the conversation you learn that that might not be the best, maybe they're not well positioned to put in a referral for you, it's still good to go in with a clear objective so you know what you're trying to aim for through that conversation. And the fifth step, and this is the most important, especially when trying to build long-term relationships, not just transactional relationships that serve you right now, but long-term relationships. Even if the conversation isn't fruitful now, you are building for the future. So make sure you follow up. Bring people along on your journey. Let them know how things are progressing or where you ended up. Say you talked to someone or 3 or 5 people at one company and you ended up somewhere else. Let them know, because they took the time out to speak with you. In all likelihood, they're rooting for your success. They've connected with you and they want to see you do well. You're potentially a resource to them longer term. And this is the area where most people fall off. They'll reach out and have the initial conversation, and then they'll forget to follow up, or it won't feel as important. But that is the secret sauce of building meaningful long-term relationships and a meaningful long-term network that's going to serve you throughout your career. In both our coaching programs and our self-paced course, we offer tools across each of these 5 areas. So email templates, for example, trackers, conversation guides, and we help you with each of these steps. So if that's something that's of interest, happy to connect more about that after the webinar. The next tip I have is to be present and engage authentically. What I mean by this is get in the right headspace before the call. If you're too focused on yourself, which we often are when we're going into situations where we feel we're being evaluated, like interviews or coffee chats, things like that. If you're too focused on your appearance, your story, the impression you're making, you're missing out on lots of verbal and nonverbal cues from the other person. And also people can tell. We have an energy that we give off, even if there's a screen or some other kind of interface between us. And people can tell when you're engaged and actively listening and being responsive to what they're saying versus just kind of being automatic and robotic. So be as present as you can. A couple things that I do to get present before any kind of important call like that, where it's important to me to connect with another person. I will do breathing exercises sometimes. If I'm feeling really in my head and anxious, I'll do jumping jacks sometimes. So a lot of times that anxiety that we feel and that fear of judgment or kind of like self-focus, we can dial that down by connecting with our bodies. And by getting into your body, kind of like shifting the energy, it'll allow you to be more present in that conversation. The third tip I have is to help make sure that you're successful as you're networking is to focus on weak ties. So this might be something you've heard before. If you haven't, let me just quickly explain what I mean by weak ties and strong ties. So strong ties are people you're close to, your family, your friends, your team at work. Weak ties are people you know, but not that well. Maybe they're people that you went to school with, people that you briefly worked with on projects, friends of friends. Most people, when networking, stick to strong ties, asking your friends or family for referrals or guidance. It feels more comfortable and it's intuitive. The people you know and love are more likely to help you, right? But research actually shows that when it's your weak ties that are the most powerful when it comes to networking. Unlike people within your inner circle with whom you probably already share the same network, you have the same set of knowledge about, roughly the same companies. It's kind of like people that you overlap with in many ways. your weak ties are actually more satellite and they're further out. And so they're the ones that are more likely to know of or be able to bridge you to opportunities that no one else can. So that's something else to remember. It's like it might feel awkward to reach out to someone you don't know that well, but that's where you're going to see a lot of value when you know. So the next thing I want to talk about is the most common networking mistakes and how to avoid them. This is something that's really important because I think when people hear the word networking, as I was mentioning at the beginning, it feels really icky. And a lot of times it feels icky because it feels transactional. I am trying to get something from this person. It feels like, almost like an interview where like they are the gatekeepers, they are powerful. I'm trying to get something for them. There's an imbalance in this dynamic. But here's the thing, most people at some level understand the importance of networking. They get why we need to do it. Many will still grumble about it though, or call it phony or a waste of time. And mostly it's because we feel uncomfortable doing it. That's why it's important to reframe networking to yourself as simply an opportunity to build genuine human connection. The person on the other side of the table doesn't hold unilateral power. They're not the arbiter of your fate. Rather, they're a human being with their own dreams, worries, motivations, stressors. And if you're reaching out, it's likely because you have something in common. So focus on not trying to get something out of this person, but on connecting. And who knows, you might be useful to them too. So that's the second point, or pitfall that people often don't think about, that they have nothing to offer this person, that they are kind of at their mercy or at their whim. But people like being asked for advice or guidance. It makes them feel respected and valued and offers them an opportunity to talk about themselves and reflect on their own experiences. So there's mutual benefit there too. I know oftentimes I've had many people reach out to me for coffee chats or informal networking, and it's a way to codify some of my own experiences. Like they ask me questions I hadn't thought about in a while. They ask me how I navigated something, and it reminds me that I've done hard things before. Whether it's going through, just earlier today, I spoke with someone who was trying to put together, working through a take-home assessment and had questions based on my consulting experience about how to frame something. And I remembered, oh yeah, I actually do have a really good grasp of structured problem solving. This is something I have to offer. And it was a reminder to me, as the person that was being reached out to, that, it was just a reminder to me of some of the experience I had. So there's a benefit to me there too. And it was enjoyable to kind of feel like an expert in that moment. The next point, in terms of a common mistake, is to make it a conversation, not an interrogation. So there's a lot of research out there, and there's specifically research from Harvard Business School that showed that people prefer two things. One, they prefer more questions to fewer because it demonstrates genuine interest. And two, they actually prefer follow-up questions in terms of type of question because it demonstrates responsiveness and active listening. So it's not just that you have a list of questions and you are barreling through them, bam, 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 but you're actively listening to what the other person is saying. You're thinking about it, you're reflecting, and you're responding back to them. And that's something that makes a person feel really heard and listened to and engaged and connected with you and wanting to help you. The last point is don't take rejections personally. When we're rejected, it feels like it's about who we are at our core. Perhaps we feel misunderstood, perhaps we feel ashamed, but what's important to keep in mind is that it's almost never about you. The other person is a human with their own lives, habits, and sources of stress. If, after respectful follow-ups, someone is still unresponsive, move on, but stick with your outreach plan. The only way to get comfortable with rejection is lots and lots of practice. You can even gamify it. Aim to hit a certain number of rejections per week to start numbing yourself to that feeling and reminding yourself that it's not personal, that it's a numbers game, and it's about reaching out. The more people you reach out to, the more people are likely to respond to you. So with that, that was kind of the majority of what I wanted to cover with you, short and sweet today. I'm here to answer some questions that you guys dropped in the chat. I see one now. So it says, what is your view on trying to connect with an interviewer post-interview and decision? I'm guessing that means none so far has responded. So absolutely connect with interviewers post-interview as soon as possible, but definitely within 24 hours. Make sure that you're reaching out to the interviewer and sending it at a minimum a thank you note. One of the things that both I like to do and I advise clients on is in that thank you note being really personal. Instead of just thanks so much for taking the time, be specific, kind of reflect back on moments that really made you think in the interview. Maybe there's a really good question. Maybe there was something that they shared with you that was really useful to you, or that made you think differently. Mention that and share how it's kind of shifted your thinking, or share what you're going to do with that. Let them know what the next steps are in your process, because not everyone knows. Oftentimes, interviewers will just come in, they're interviewing you, and they're moving on, and they're not necessarily aware of what happens next. So another thing you can do is let them know, say, next I'll be speaking with so and so. I'm really looking forward to continuing this conversation, learning more about the company. Is it okay if I reach back out to you and kind of keep you up to date on how this is going? And then also on after the decision, same thing. Make sure that you're following up with people, everyone that you've spoken with, to the extent that you can. Reach back out and let them know what happened, one way or the other. Whether you got an offer and decided to take it and are excited to join, whether you decided to go somewhere else, etc. In terms of LinkedIn, so the question is whether or not to connect with them on LinkedIn. Sure, but if you're going to connect with someone on LinkedIn, make sure that you're including a message with it. Don't just add like a blanket LinkedIn. Even if you just spoke with them, they may not remember. And also, I wouldn't necessarily expect too much from that process. Some people volunteer to interview, they're really engaged in the process, they want to get to know people, and they're happy to stay in touch. Other people kind of are just doing it and moving on with their day. So you can send that LinkedIn request. Again, what we advise clients on is to be hungry, happy, and humble. So reach out to them, keep it brief, be respectful of their time. And if they don't accept the connection, no hard feelings. There we go, another question from Maria. Any tips on how to reach out to recruiters or hiring managers? How should I structure the conversation in the initial reach out? Yes. So if you are applying to a job, absolutely reach out to the recruiter and the hiring manager. If it's a job that you found on LinkedIn or on a company website, oftentimes the recruiter will be listed or the hiring manager will be listed. If you're not sure, you can also do searches on LinkedIn. You type in recruiter you can do a search in LinkedIn where you can filter based on the role, and you can type in recruiter and you can put in the company name. And through that process, you can figure out some of the recruiters that work at that company. And so you can reach out to a couple of them if you're not sure specifically who's the one for that role. Same thing with hiring managers. You can typically narrow it down by putting in the function, the title if you know it, and the company, and just identifying a few people, whether they're the hiring manager or they know who is and can connect you to them. How should you structure the conversation in the initial reach out? I would say, again, short and sweet. So let them know that you just applied, that you're really excited about the role, that you'd love to connect. Depending on the situation, we often advise that you can send your resume. Just say, hey, I just want to let you know, here's the resume I submitted. I'd love to connect with you. Do you have 15 minutes to chat, and send a couple of specifics on dates and times to let them reach out. To reach out to them. I would say that they may not always respond, but this is often a really good way. Even if the hiring manager doesn't respond, there might be a recruiter that does. But it's a really good way to get insight into the company and also make yourself stand out, because LinkedIn makes it so easy to apply online that out of hundreds of applications, if only a few people are reaching out directly to the recruiter and hiring manager, it might buy you another 15 or 30 seconds of someone looking at the resume, and that may make all the difference. And so Maria also asked, should you also include a short introduction about yourself? You can. I would keep it very brief and to the point about why you are, how to connect yourself to the role. Ideally, they're going to, most likely they're going to look at your LinkedIn profile. So one of the things we advise our members on is making sure that your headline is reflective of the role that you want, that each one of the jobs that you've done previously reflects not just your responsibilities, but your accomplishments. And so we work with members on all of that to make sure that their LinkedIn profile and their resumes are reflective of the job they're targeting. So ideally, you can include a quick line about yourself if you'd like to. But ideally, they're clicking on your LinkedIn profile and seeing all of that for themselves anyway. It should be very obvious to them why you're a good fit for the role. Catherine asks, any recs on if it's better to apply through a company's website versus LinkedIn, or does it matter? This one kind of varies. Some companies are specific and they want you to apply through their website and they specify in the LinkedIn post. Some have easy apply on LinkedIn. So it's really specific to the opportunity. You can also potentially do both, although some systems will flag that if you have multiple applications in. So I'd say read the job description thoroughly. And regardless, even if you apply on a company's website instead of LinkedIn, because that's what they asked you to do, still reach out to the recruiter and the hiring manager on LinkedIn. And you can still say, hey, this is the resume, that note that we just talked about with Miriam. Sure. Any other questions? All right, Brandy asked, piggybacking on Maria's question, how would you suggest reaching out to company employees without appearing to just want the scoop on the company? That's exactly what you want, right? You want the scoop on the company, and people know that, and that's okay. I'd say you're more likely to get the real information or kind of a more candid take. You're more likely to get a candid take from someone either you know or through a warm introduction. What I mean by a warm introduction is someone that you know is connecting you to someone that they know. So those people, because they're already kind of trusted, are more likely to be more candid with you. That's not to say that if you just kind of cold outreach to someone that they wouldn't be. It might be, that's their personality. They might be more open. But you just share that you're really interested in the company. You admire them. The mission excites you. You think that you can bring some value and you'd like to learn more about the opportunity. You're looking to learn more. And people know that's what you're reaching out for, that you're trying to get insight into the company. That's the whole point of the conversation. So it's okay if that's the impression that you give. That's in the beginning when we're first forming relationships with people, sometimes it is more targeted like that, where there's a very specific ask, like, I want to learn about this company or this role or this team, and that's okay. Sure. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'll stay on for a few more minutes in case anybody has anything else. But if you'd like to learn more about how we might be able to help you either with your networking strategy, optimizing your LinkedIn or resume, supporting you and helping you prepare for interviews or salary negotiations, feel free to reach out for a strategy call, free. You can go to www.careersprout.com/schedule and you will speak with me or one of the other coaches. We'll talk about your experience. You'll fill out a short application when you reach out for the schedule, and then we'll talk about where you are, where you want to go, what's standing in your way, and whether we can be of help to you. Oh, okay, Robert, good question. Any advice on working a room at conferences? Yes. So I think the best advice is preparation. Don't usually, when you're going to a conference, you can often identify, especially in this day and age, the majority of other people that are going to be there. Sometimes there are apps. So there's applications, or websites where you can see all the other participants that are going to be going. You can see the companies that'll be going. So you should have a sense before you're going to this conference, especially if it's some kind of industry conference, of who's going to be there. And you want to prepare by making your short list of who you want to talk to. It can be really specific, like if you know participant names of specifically, I want to talk to Brandy, Maria, and Robert, for example. Or it can be broader, like I want to talk to folks from Microsoft, Amazon, and Stripe. Like these are the, within these teams. So that's the big thing I'd say is prepare. Have your list ready for who you want to talk to. And then once you're in the room, and this is when it starts really being dependent on the setup a little bit. If there are booths, which booths to go up to. If there are, name tags and things like that, kind of keep a lookout for the people that kind of match your list. So the idea is that you shouldn't necessarily walk into a room or a conference and just kind of wander and just talk to whoever shows up. Although there's nothing wrong with the serendipity of what can happen in a conference, but you should have a general idea rather of what you want to, who you want to talk to, and what you want to get out of those conversations, right? So you should have a goal. I want to talk to this person for this reason. This is what I'd like to leave with. This is the call to action, either actions for me afterwards or actions for them. That I'd love for them to take. Maybe it's setting up a demo, maybe it's introducing me to someone else, that kind of thing. So you should be really clear on what you want out of those conversations. The advice is pretty much the same. Prepare and know what your ask is. Maria, any tips on declining an offer without burning a bridge with that recruiter? Absolutely. It is something that, especially in today's market, a lot of recruiters are seeing. It's what we call a candidates market. And so in many cases, candidates have multiple offers. Just because you don't end up taking that offer, it doesn't mean that you can't continue to have a good relationship with that recruiter. Of course, they will be disappointed. They've worked with you, they've built a relationship, they see you as a really good candidate for a job. But again, we talk about being hungry, humble, and happy. The other thing I'd add to that is being grateful. So the first, what I would always lead with anyone that's helped you throughout that process, whether you take a job offer or not, is to lead with gratitude. Thank you for their time. Thank you for their opportunity, the advice, insight, whatever it is that they've offered you through that process. Say that you're really grateful. And if you feel like it's appropriate, you can offer a reason. Ultimately, I chose to take this offer because, it's remote, or it pays more, or it's, within the space that I want to be learning about. I see greater opportunity for growth. It's moved faster. The offer on this side has moved fast. Whatever your reason is, if you think it's appropriate and you have that relationship with the recruiter, you can let them know why, but always let them know. Don't just, when you decline the offer, do what you can to let both the hiring manager and the recruiter know, and do it with gratitude. Sure. So Aston, you're saying that you looked up a recruiter before an interview in LinkedIn today and really scored points on a phone interview. You use that information to ask why he jumped at the opportunity to work for the company you were interviewing for. He really appreciated it. Absolutely. So if that wasn't already clear, LinkedIn is an amazing tool. And every single conversation I go into, whether it's an interview or a coffee chat, I always look the person up, and I advise all of my clients to always look the person up. The biggest thing to scan for is, one, is there any point of connection? So, did they share an interest? Like maybe they shared they're an avid hiker and you love hiking and you can talk about national parks that you've been to. Maybe you have some people in common, like you know someone and they know someone. Maybe you've had a similar career journey or worked at similar companies or gone to similar schools. So any point of connection where you can kind of break the ice, instead of just being interviewer and candidate, you can break it down to be human and human. That's really going to benefit you in pretty much every interview or coffee chat conversation you go into. From Robert, any advice on gathering compensation information? Yes. You might already be familiar with these. Um, Glassdoor is a great source, but there's lots of other sources as well. That will often have it depends on the company. Some company data is more robust than others, either because they have more employees, and so therefore, a greater number of people are sharing, or just more employees are posting, whatever it might be. So websites like Glassdoor that collect salary and compensation information are great resources. Another one is your warm connection. So sometimes if you really know someone well, you can ask them a bit about compensation and how it's structured. But the third way is that even when companies post jobs, if they're hiring in Colorado, they have to post salary information, and they might call it out as specific for Colorado, but this is coming to New York as well, I believe, and I can get back to you all on that, but I believe it's coming to New York as of April. But that if they're posting jobs that are hiring in those states, that they have to share compensation information. So many times now, if you scroll down and they are hiring in those states, you'll see compensation information right in the post. You just have to go scroll far enough down. Aston, Maria, Catherine, Brandy, Robert, thank you so much for the questions. If there are no other questions, we'll call it for today. But again, feel free to reach out to us and set up time to talk about really any career questions you have, especially if you're looking for some support at www.careersprout.com/schedule. You're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome. Aston, okay, one more question. What if the salary is said to be a fixed rate per hour? What is the view about any wiggle room for negotiation? So I've encountered this situation as well, both with myself and with clients. Sometimes fixed is really fixed, but just because it's a fixed rate per hour, one, it doesn't mean that there isn't room for negotiation. There can be. And you can always ask. The worst they can say is no. And two, compensation, salary compensation isn't the only thing you can negotiate. Sometimes you can negotiate your on-site versus off-site. If you'd rather be more remote, you might be able to negotiate 1 or 2 days remote, a full-time remote. You might be able to negotiate your time off. So you might, if it's 3 weeks, you might be able to bump it up to 3 weeks and 3 days or something like that. So the point is that there's many other things besides salary that you can negotiate, even if the salary, if you go in and ask and the salary they're not moving at all, there is room on other things. You can negotiate bonuses, which is also sometimes what we often advise clients to do. So you have lots of options there around how to negotiate. All right. Thank you, everyone. I hope it was useful. It sounds like it was. I will take this last question from Robert, and then we'll wrap up. Any advice on getting clarity? Robert, I guess I'm not sure quite what you mean on clarity. I'm guessing it means clarity on what you want out of your career, what you want your next step to be. One of the biggest things that I advise clients on is grounding in your values. So a lot of times when we perceive conflict when there maybe might not be, we perceive values conflict when what you really need to do is step back and say, what is it that I want out of life? What do I value? How does that relate to what I want out of life? And then how does that relate to what I want out of my career? Where do I want to be in 10 or 15 years? And then we go through, often with clients, an exercise of mapping your career nirvana of, if this is where you want to be in 15 years, where do you need to be in 12? Where do you need to be in 10? Where do you need to be in 5? And then what's your next role? So that process can often help get you clarity. And just because you're clear on something now doesn't mean that can't change in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. So it's what I say is ground in your values, but let everything else be in flux, kind of hold everything else a little bit more loosely. Where, things like industry can change, or role type can change, the hours that you want to work can change, the city, things like that. But ultimately what you want out of life, if that's roughly the same, it'll kind of continue to be an anchor for you as you move through life. So with that was the last question. So thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate your time. I will say it's been weird for me to have this be kind of just talking to myself. I appreciate the questions on LinkedIn because it helps make it more interactive, and I really want to make sure that the conversations we're having are valuable to you. So happy for you to connect with me on LinkedIn, Aston, for your question, and would love for you all to reach out and for us to connect over the phone through a strategy call. So thank you for your time. I hope this was useful and hopefully talk soon. Take care.